I heard the front door open as I was finishing up the dishes. Ted's voice carried through the house. "Oh, Ashley, you're here!" I wiped my hands on a towel and glanced at the clock. It wasn't unusual for Ashley to drop by unannounced, but something about her timing always felt intentional, like she knew when Ted would be home. "I borrowed the car," Ashley chirped, her voice sweet and melodic. She was standing in the doorway with her brother, her perfectly styled hair falling over her shoulders. "Hope that's okay." Ted beamed at her, completely enamored. "You filled up the tank, right?" "Of course. And guess what? No scratches this time," Ashley added with a little laugh, giving me a glance that sent a chill down my spine. Her smile was too fleeting, too eerie. "See, Megan," Ted said, stroking her hair gently. "Ashley's considerate. Maybe you could learn a thing or two from her." I forced a smile, but inside, my irritation boiled. Ted had no idea how much Ashley's visits grated on me. She was always around, always needing something, and Ted never seemed to mind. In fact, he welcomed it. "Thanks again, Ted," Ashley cooed before giving me one last look, her lips curling into that unsettling grin. "See you, Megan." I watched her walk out, the sound of her heels clicking down the driveway. Something felt off. The way she smiled at me, it wasn't friendly. It was smug, like she knew something I didn't. Story 2. Amy. Starting next month, I want to reduce our household expenses. Again, what? The business is struggling and has even had to make significant layoffs. Thus, my pay will drop once more. I'm not getting fired, at least. That may be the case, but please find a way. After all, you are a housewife full-time. How much will it drop this time then? 500, that much. Yes, that is the situation then. I appreciate your understanding. I'm going to shower right now. After stating his piece, my husband quickly stood up and headed for the bathroom. I am Amy Holmes, 33 years old. I've been married for a complete 5 years, having met my husband through a friend's introduction. His sibling and their spouse live together in his parental home, so we live separately. The in-laws don't really interfere with us. We have a distant yet uncomplicated relationship. I think they are quite decent. I was working even after marriage, but I quit 3 years ago when my health declined a bit. My husband worked at a reasonably large company, so his salary was enough to support us. Without my income. However, I don't know how much that amount was initially when we both worked. We split expenses, he paid the rent, I paid utilities, and we shared other living expenses. After I quit my job, instead of me managing his salary, he would deposit $2,000 monthly into our joint account for living expenses. He continued to pay the rent separately, so the amount was sufficient for both of us, and we could even save comfortably. About 2 years ago, the company hit a rough patch leading to salary cuts instead of layoffs, so I had to make do with $1,700 for living expenses. It wasn't too stressful, and I figured these things happen every now and then. However, 6 months later, it was cut by another $200, and 5 months ago by another $400. Now we are down to $1,100 for living expenses. If we cut another $500, that leaves us with just $600. That amount is barely enough for utilities, food, other expenses, and my mobile bill. Moreover, I am skeptical about whether his company is really performing that poorly. I can understand minor troubles, but reducing the living expenses to less than half of the original seems drastic, unless the situation has significantly worsened. But I haven't heard any rumors, and it doesn't seem that bad from the outside. So I decided to ask outright, "Hey, is the company really in such trouble?" "I haven't heard anything like that." "Of course it is. If people outside notice, it could affect our dealings. We are a major company. After all, such matters are kept highly confidential, making it seem like everything is normal." "I see. So don't casually mention this to anyone. If it gets out that my wife leaked such info, I'd immediately be a target for layoffs." "Understood." I realized then that no company, not even a major one, is safe these days. Perhaps being a large company, we need to maintain appearances, which could be quite challenging. I thought this is precisely the time for us to work together as a couple. Since my husband didn't complain when I quit my job due to my health, it's my turn to support him. He has been working hard, increasing his overtime and business trips for the past 2 years. Yet his salary has decreased. He must be feeling helpless and suffering the most. He must be keeping a brave face for my sake, I told myself. But 3 months later, with a somber expression, he said to me, "It might be impossible to put money into the living expenses for a while." What? So I have a request. What is it? You need to work and cover the living expenses. I had already been considering taking up a part-time job, since I was feeling much better physically and could start working any time if I worked. Wouldn't that solve everything? But indeed, I hadn't expected him to be entirely unable to contribute to our living expenses. Your health is okay now, right? Yeah. I was actually thinking about starting work again. That's great. Just hang in there until the company recovers and the salary might increase again. That's true. We need to pull together more than ever now. It helps to hear you say that being able to overcome anything as a couple is the essence of marriage. I opted to work at a neighboring grocery that was seeking part-timers. They requested whether I could work full-time from 9 to 5, including weekends, as much as feasible. And after discussing it with my spouse, he was all for it. I'm fine. My overtime and business trips are going to rise substantially more, even more than today. I need to strive to improve the wage a bit, but don't overdo it. Your health is the most crucial. Don't worry so you can work more too. Really? Yes? Don't worry about me at all. Returning to work after 3 years was nice, since I naturally like being active. The shop valued my aid, owing to a staff shortage, which was rewarding. However, they would ask virtually every weekend if I could potentially work. They never forced me. Every time they requested, I couldn't say no, seeing how much they needed aid each time. My hubby would joyfully see me off. "I'll put in my best effort and work on the weekends if you're going to work. Therefore, you should continue to work harder and harder." He got along okay, although it seemed a little strange to be told to labor more and more. However, I adapted to this way of life with time. It felt satisfying to be needed at work, and my part-time co-workers were really kind. The senior unmarried women who predominated at my prior employment were difficult and disapproved of married women working there. My poor health had been exacerbated by that stress. Additionally, saving money on food was made possible by being able to purchase near-expiry foods for less than half price. Working ended up being a wise choice. Our finances were significantly improved by the higher hourly rate on weekends and during overtime. Over the past 6 months, I've adjusted to our new way of life. I noticed that I was talking less to my hubby. I was able to prolong my part-time hours without worrying because he would often return home late. It was also simpler because I didn't have to make dinner. However, our lifestyles were similar to those of a couple that didn't spend much time together. In addition, 2 or 3 times a month, my spouse traveled for work. With everything he was working on, his pay ought to have increased by now, in my opinion. Although my husband had always been engrossed in his phone, he appeared to be paying considerably more attention to it lately. He seemed nervous whenever his phone rang. Is there a problem? What? Have you recently been especially concerned about your smartphone? It's a component of who I am. In addition, I'm now involved in a significant commercial transaction. I have no doubt that my pay will rise if this goes well. I realize that I'm nervous about getting a call from that client. Sounds difficult. It's incredibly difficult. With your part-time work, you have it simple. Don't claim it simple. I work hard for our household as well. My husband has been making me feel inferior about my work lately. He believes it's only natural for me to work and contribute financially because I loved being a stay-at-home wife. It felt unfair to be disparaged in person, even though there might be some truth to it. It would be pleasant to occasionally be appreciated. However, I think that if I persisted and his business circumstances improved, things would eventually improve. But then there was another incident. We were notified that our utility bill payment was unsuccessful. Less than $10 remained when I hurried to update the passbook. I always made sure to keep at least $5,000 in the account, which was intended to be used exclusively for bill payments, preparing for any potential crises. I added $500 to the $5,000 balance at the end of last month after getting paid. Although my husband kept the cash card there to check the passbook, I never took out any money. I observed the card being used to make withdrawals. I had heard nothing about my husband stealing the money, but it was definitely him. What was the purpose of the funds? He could have discussed it before pulling out if it was truly necessary. Regardless of the relationship, it is unacceptable to use money without permission. I wanted to confront him, but it didn't seem appropriate to call him into the office for a conversation like that. I made the decision to wait until nightfall for him to return home. I waited up even though he had said he would be late because of overtime. I was unable to sleep anyhow, as worried as I was. My husband got home shortly before 1 in the morning. I was shocked to see that I was awake in the living room. "You're up. But why?" "I was anticipating your arrival. Were you in need of anything?" "I'm really tired. It's not that." "I need something. You know what this is about." "No." "Then what is this?" I showed him the passbook with the withdrawals in front of him. He made a brief expression of realization, but neither looked particularly surprised nor guilty. "What is this about?" "Explain it as you see." "I needed the money, so I used it. It's originally my money anyway. I don't need to ask for your permission. It's our money as a couple. Couldn't you have at least mentioned it before using it?" "I needed it for work. Men have various social obligations. Understand that?" I couldn't understand at all. It seemed unlikely for a salaried employee like my husband to need to advance $5,000 for work expenses. It became urgently necessary. "I'll get it reimbursed, so it's fine. After all, you lived off my money for nearly 3 years without working, so don't make a fuss over a little spending your money. I've been doing all the household chores properly, even when I was working. And since I started the part-time job, you never helped with anything, and I never complained." "That's expected. You're the housewife." He refused to give a clear explanation. Dodging the issue with inadequate reasons, he claimed he would have missed a contract if he hadn't advanced the money for entertainment expenses. He went to bed midway through the argument, claiming he was too tired to continue without ever making any sense. I couldn't believe he was telling the truth. This deserved a more complete discussion. However, I thought it fruitless to start such a conversation in the morning. So I woke him up as usual, but he didn't respond. Whether he was sulking or whatever his reason, he didn't move despite my several attempts to wake him. So I ultimately quit up. Then at the last minute, before he would be late, he hurried out of bed in a hurry, cursing at me for not awakening him sooner on my day off from work. I took the opportunity to clean the home, a duty I hadn't done in a while. Around 10 a.m., I heard his smartphone ringing in the bedroom. He had forgotten it. Seeing the caller was his firm, I believed it may be him and responded. As predicted, it was. "Your crazy chat yesterday made me sleep in and I completely forgot my phone. Bring it now." "What if an essential call comes in?" he yelled one-sidedly. But I promised to deliver it to his office. His phone was vibrating in my bag while I was on the train, but I chose not to check it, since I was in transit. His office building was about a 5-minute walk from the station. His phone vibrated once more as soon as I got off the train. I constantly checked to be sure it was a call from an unidentified male. Perhaps this was the business colleague he kept bringing up in his calls. It appeared to be urgent. I replied, figuring it would be better to explain that he was without his phone. "The infant has been born. Hurry over to the hospital." The voice of a joyful young woman interrupted the phone before I could reply. Although a woman was speaking, the caller ID displayed a man's identity. What's all this about? I thought. My spouse was in the foyer when I arrived at his place, perhaps already aware of the train I was traveling on. The woman was talking on the phone, completely unaware that I had remained silent. Yes, I did. The infant resembles Steve exactly. So hurry and come visit him. It was obvious what she was implying. As I walked through the front doors of the firm, I was overcome with a sense of complete incredulity. My spouse came running over to me and gave me a fierce look. "What are you doing? You're running late." What if it was a message of importance? Such a crucial message? The voice went on. I held it out to him from the phone, loud enough for others to hear, and I switched on the phone speaker. "Hello." "Hello? When will you get a divorce then? Now that the baby is here, I can't wait any longer. I don't want to spend my entire life as a mistress. It's not enough to just pay my living bills." With a panicked gaze, my spouse scanned his surroundings. "Hey, do you hear me? Steve? Your baby is here." Make an effort to yell loudly and appear a little pleased about it. Suddenly, my spouse grabbed the phone. Steve, react promptly. Bring enough money because I'll need it more and more. He hung up the phone frantically. Present employees watched with great interest. Here it is. What is happening here, exactly? The phone vibrated once more as I interrupted, but he did not move to respond. Will you not respond to it? Isn't that a crucial call? Something about the birth of your child. What? There must be a miscommunication. Nothing was heard by me. Indeed. Nearby, a female employee held up her hand as though responding. I heard it. Steve's child, stated someone on the phone. Steve, isn't that you, Steve Holmes? I also heard it. I may have also heard it. As many around us added their voices, my spouse became noticeably agitated. Is there a chance it's an affair? Probably. I am, after all, standing here as Steve Holmes's wife. Whoa, the worst is that he and his mistress had a child. Really? Incredibly so. The reason you weren't investing money into our household wasn't because of the company's poor performance, but because you were supporting your mistress. I also pressed. The point is that he made everyone's eyes grow even more icy. He was obviously taken by surprise and was just paying attention to the looks around him. Hey, what's going on here? Not very good. The earnings of our business are skyrocketing. He was turning pale instead of crimson. Then, without warning, he screamed and stole my phone. I made no effort to chase after him. Like an idiot, I just stood there and watched him go. Having put in a lot of effort without any notion that my husband may lose his job now that his affair was out, I felt like a clown. However, I also hoped I could vanish into a hole, feeling ashamed. I seemed to be cool, but I was trembling on the inside. My anguish was further exacerbated by the sympathetic looks I received from everyone around me, who saw me as the miserable lady whose husband had cheated and fathered a kid. I didn't want to be any worse off, though, so I refrained from crying. I'm sorry to have made a scene. On the train home, I apologized and fled the scene. I kept thinking about what my spouse had said to me, almost crying many times. However, I refrained. My spouse called as soon as I got home, seemingly to discover me there. How will you respond to this? I looked foolish because of you. My line should be that. I worked hard since, as you stated, the compensation was decreased. However, all of it was false, wasn't it? That is. How could you continue to tell lies like that? And a kid? What were you contemplating? Well, I reasoned that if I didn't have to contribute to our household's finances, perhaps I could manage. Don't make fun of me. That isn't feasible. He continued to argue, but I had had enough and hung up. My husband didn't come home that night, so I turned off the phone, and by the next day, I felt a little more stable. I called my in-laws to inform them of the situation and to express my desire for a divorce. I then requested that my parents come get me. Telling my parents that my husband had been cheating, supporting his mistress, and fathering a child for 2 years was embarrassing, but they didn't say anything when they accepted me. In fact, parents are a blessing. The divorce process proceeded without incident thanks to my in-laws' assistance. In fact, his mistress received the $5,000 to cover the costs of giving birth. My in-laws made sure he paid it all at once after I, of course, demanded compensation from both my husband and his mistress. However, because he had been spending money on his mistress, he had no savings and appeared to have accrued debt. According to my in-laws, the entire compensation and property settlement amounted to almost $100,000 because it was only fair in light of the previous 2 years. My ex-husband resigned because he found it too difficult to stay after receiving criticism from everyone at his workplace. He received roughly $25,000 in severance pay, but it was insufficient to pay off his debts. Despite living with his mistress, he struggled to find a new job and made do with day labor. My in-laws claim that with all of the debt looming over him, he was exhausted. There was a crying baby and an irate girlfriend. He has repeatedly asked for assistance, but I have never offered it. They told me apologetically that if it came to that, they might take the child. I wouldn't object to that, of course. I have no right to get involved, and the child is innocent regardless of their birth circumstances. I hope they have a healthy upbringing. I now live with my parents in peace. For a change of scenery, I'm considering joining them at a hot spring. There was good news, too. I was offered a full-time job at the supermarket headquarters where I worked part-time, and I gladly accepted because they valued my efforts. I'm resolved to continue putting in a lot of effort. When she left, I slipped outside to check the car. No dents, no scratches, and just as she'd said, the gas tank was full. Still, that smile lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the unease. Ted came up behind me, wrapping an arm around my waist. Ashley's more mature than you give her credit for. Even when you're mean to her, she's thoughtful. You should try being more like her. I stiffened at his words. I'm going to check inside the car, I muttered. What? You still don't trust her? Ted's grin vanished, replaced by a scowl. Megan, she's my sister. You need to stop being so suspicious. She's taking advantage of you, Ted. Of us. I sighed, trying to keep my voice steady. I mean, I'd love to use the car too, but I've been letting her have it because I know she needs it more. Fine, he said after a long pause. If it's that big of a deal, I'll take the car tomorrow. Happy? I nodded, watching as he walked back into the house, humming to himself. He was so pleased with the idea of driving to work for once. Little did I know that small decision would unravel everything. The next morning, Ted left the house grinning from ear to ear, dressed in his best suit. He had some big meeting, and getting to commute by car was the cherry on top for him. "See you later," he called out as he hopped into the driver's seat. I waved from the doorway, but something about the way the car sat in the driveway gave me a bad feeling. Barely 10 minutes later, I heard a loud, sharp scream from outside. I bolted to the window, heart pounding. Ted was standing by the car, pacing in circles and holding his back like he was in pain. I ran outside, my stomach sinking. "What happened?" I asked, rushing to his side. Ted spun around, his face twisted in anger. The moment I sat down, something stabbed me in the back. "What the hell is going on, Megan?" Confused, I leaned into the driver's seat, checking the spot where he'd sat. And there it was, a razor blade, tucked right into the middle of the seat. Shiny, sharp, chilling. My breath caught in my throat. No way. Ted's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "What is that doing there?" I pulled the blade out carefully, my hands trembling. The only person who used the car last night was Ashley. Ted shook his head, clearly not ready to believe what I was implying. It couldn't have been her. Maybe someone else did it? I narrowed my eyes. No one else touched the car, Ted. He glanced at his watch, muttered a curse, and ran back inside to change. "I'm going to be late!" I stood there, staring at the blade in my hand, my mind racing. If I had been the one to drive that morning, or worse, if Candace had gotten in that car, we could have been seriously hurt. The thought made me shudder. When Ted left for work, I couldn't shake the dread settling in my chest. Something was seriously wrong. Ashley's been pushy, sure, but this was something else entirely. Just as I was mulling it over, my phone rang. It was her. The second I answered, she started yelling. "Ted scolded me because of you." "What?" "You told him about the gas. That's why he yelled at me this morning." Her voice was shrill, furious. "Why did you let him drive? The razor blade was for you." My blood ran cold. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," she spat. "You deserve to get hurt, not Ted." I gripped the phone tighter, my hand shaking with rage. "Are you out of your mind? You planted a razor blade in the car?" Before I could finish, she hung up. I stood there staring at the screen, my heart racing. This wasn't just petty jealousy or sibling attachment. Ashley was dangerous. She wanted to hurt me, and the worst part? Ted wouldn't believe me. When Ted got home that night, I decided to confront him. "Where's the car?" he asked as soon as he walked in. "Your darling sister took it," I said flatly. "She hasn't brought it back." Ted's jaw clenched. "Stop talking about her like that." I folded my arms across my chest. "She stole the keys again, while I was distracted on the phone with you. She wouldn't—" "She did," I snapped. "And you're enabling her." Before we could argue further, The doorbell rang. Ashley stood there, smiling sweetly. "Oh, Ted, you're home. I borrowed the car earlier." "Of course," Ted said, smiling back at her. "Did you fill it up?" Ashley nodded enthusiastically. "Of course I did. Anything for you." Then she glanced at me, that creepy grin stretching across her face again. "See, Megan? I'm considerate. Maybe you should take notes." Ted chuckled and gently patted her head. "See? She's thoughtful." I clenched my fists at my sides. Ashley was playing him like a fiddle, and he couldn't even see it. "All right, I'm heading home," Ashley said with a cheery wave. "See you later, Ted." "Bye, Megan." As soon as she left, I turned to Ted. "How can you not see what's happening? She's manipulating you." Ted sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're overthinking it." "No, I'm not," I shot back. "She admitted to planting that razor blade." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Megan, she's family. I've known her my whole life. She wouldn't do that." "Are you serious right now?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You'd rather believe her over me?" Ted just shook his head. "I'm too tired to argue about this." And just like that, he walked away, leaving me standing there in the kitchen, fuming. I watched him retreat to our bedroom, my heart sinking. This wasn't just about Ashley anymore. It was about us, our marriage, the trust we used to have. It was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. The next morning, Ted barely spoke to me before leaving for work. I was still fuming from the night before, but I couldn't let it consume me. I had orders to fill for my accessory business, and staying busy was my only way to keep my mind off things. Still, Ashley's words echoed in my head. "The razor blade was for you." What kind of person says that? And more importantly, what kind of brother brushes it off like it's nothing? I tried to push the thought aside as I worked, but around noon, Candace came home from school early. "Mom, why is the car gone again?" she asked, dropping her backpack by the door. I froze. "What?" "It's not in the driveway," she said, looking confused. "Is Dad using it?" "No." I rushed to the window and peered outside. Sure enough, the car was gone. My heart sank. Ashley. Without saying a word, I grabbed my phone and dialed Ted. He picked up after a few rings, sounding distracted. "Hey, what's up?" "Ted, did you take the car today?" "No. Why?" "Because it's gone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I know exactly who took it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Megan, don't start." "She stole the keys again," I snapped. "While you were at work and I was in the shower or something. She's out driving our car right now, without permission." Ted sighed heavily. "Look, she probably just needed to run some errands." "Without asking? Again?" I couldn't believe how calm he was. "Ted, this isn't normal. You can't keep making excuses for her." "I'll talk to her later," he muttered. "I'm busy right now." "Of course you are," I said bitterly before hanging up. Hours passed, and Ashley still hadn't returned the car. I paced around the living room, checking my phone every few minutes. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if she got into an accident? What if she hurt someone? By the time the sun started setting, I was done waiting. I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my shoes, and told Candace, "Stay here. I'll be back soon." "Where are you going?" she asked. "To deal with something," I said. "I need to make sure this stops." I drove over to Ashley's house, determined to confront her. When I arrived, her car was in the driveway, but there was no sign of our car. My stomach twisted in knots as I knocked on the door. Ashley opened it, looking completely unbothered. "Oh, Megan." "Hi," she said with that same fake smile. "What brings you here?" "Where's the car?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "What car?" "Our car," I snapped. "The one you stole. Again." She rolled her eyes. "Relax. It's parked a few blocks away. I just needed it for a quick trip." "You didn't even ask," I said through gritted teeth. "And don't pretend like you didn't know that was wrong." Ashley crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. Why are you always so dramatic? Ted doesn't care, so why do you? Because it's not about Ted, I shot back. It's about respect. Something you clearly don't have for me, or for boundaries. She smirked, and that eerie grin returned. Respect? You think you deserve respect? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Ashley, I'm serious. This needs to stop. You've crossed the line. Her expression darkened. Or what? Before I could answer, a familiar voice called out from behind me. Ashley! I turned to see her husband, Wesley, walking up the driveway. He looked exhausted, like he'd been dealing with her nonsense for years. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice suddenly soft and sweet. She called me, Wesley said, nodding toward me, and we need to talk. Inside, Wesley and I sat across from Ashley, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Tell me what's going on, Wesley said, his voice firm. I explained everything. The car, the razor blade, the constant manipulation. I could see Wesley's expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he turned to Ashley. Is this true? She shrugged. She's exaggerating. Am I? I snapped. Your behavior is out of control, Ashley. You're not just hurting me, you're putting your own brother at risk. And you don't even care. Wesley sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. Ashley, I've given you money for gas. I've supported you through everything. But this is too much. I only took the car because I needed it, she whined. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, Wesley said, his voice cold. And you're going to have to face the consequences. Ashley's face twisted in fury. Oh, so now you're taking her side? This isn't about sides, Wesley said. It's about right and wrong. Ashley glared at me, her eyes blazing with hatred. You're the worst thing that ever happened to Ted. I stood up, shaking my head. No, Ashley, the worst thing that ever happened to Ted is you. Without another word, I walked out of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. Wesley followed me to the door, his expression somber. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly. I nodded. I'm sorry you're in this position. So am I, he said, glancing back toward the house. But I've been blind for too long. It's time for things to change. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Ashley wouldn't back down that easily, and I was right. For a few days, things felt calmer. Ashley didn't show up unannounced, and for once, I didn't have to worry about the car disappearing. I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, Wesley's confrontation had gotten through to her. But deep down, I knew better. It was a Friday evening when everything escalated again. Ted came home from work, his tie loosened and his shirt slightly wrinkled. He looked exhausted, but still managed to greet Candace with a warm smile. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard the doorbell. I'll get it, Ted said, already halfway to the door. Moments later, I heard her voice. Ashley. Hey, big bro, she chirped, like nothing had happened. I brought some snacks, thought we could hang out. I gripped the edge of the counter, my stomach churning. Here we go again. When I walked into the living room, Ashley was already sitting on the couch, her shoes kicked off like she owned the place. Ted was laughing at something she'd said, completely oblivious to my glare. Nice of you to let us know you were coming, I said, my tone clipped. Ashley looked up at me with that infuriating grin. Oh, come on, Megan. You're not still mad, are you? Before I could respond, Ted cut in. She's just here to hang out. Let's all relax, okay? Relax, I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath and turned back to the kitchen. Let Ted handle his precious sister. I was done trying to reason with him. Dinner was tense, at least for me. Ashley made herself at home, chatting nonstop about her day, her job, her friends. She conveniently left out the part where she'd stolen our car last week. Ted, of course, hung on her every word, laughing at her jokes and encouraging her stories. Candace, on the other hand, barely said a word. She picked at her food, her expression neutral, but I could tell she was just as tired of Ashley's antics as I was. After dinner, Ashley finally got up to leave. "Thanks for the meal," she said, patting Ted on the shoulder. Then she turned to me, her smile tight. "And Megan, you've really outdone yourself. I mean, considering." "Considering what?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. She shrugged innocently. "Nothing. Just saying it's impressive you managed to keep up with everything. Must be exhausting." Her tone was sweet, but her words were a dagger. I clenched my fists, biting back the urge to snap at her. As she left, I caught Ted's eye. "Do you see what she's doing?" Ted sighed, already looking exasperated. "Megan, you're reading too much into it. She didn't mean anything by that." "She's playing you," I shot back. "And you're letting her." Ted shook his head. "I'm not having this argument again." He disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty doorway. No matter what I said, he wouldn't listen. Ashley had him wrapped around her finger, and nothing I did seemed to change that. The next morning, I woke up early to take Candace to a weekend study session at school. When I went to grab the car keys, my stomach dropped. They were gone. Again. "Mom, is the car missing?" Candace asked as she walked into the room, already dressed and ready to go. I nodded, my jaw tight. "It's Ashley." "How does she keep getting the keys?" she asked, her voice filled with frustration. "Because your dad won't take my side," I muttered, grabbing my phone. I dialed Ted, who was already at the office for an early meeting. "Ted, where are the car keys?" I demanded, as soon as he picked up. "Why?" he asked, sounding confused. "They should be at home." "They're not. Ashley took them again." There was a long pause. "You don't know that." "Are you serious right now?" I snapped. "Who else would take them?" Ted sighed. "Megan, she probably just borrowed it for a bit. I'll talk to her later." "No," I said firmly. "You're going to deal with this now." "I can't," he said. "I'm in a meeting. Just let it go, okay?" I hung up without responding. Let it go? Not this time. By the time Ashley returned with the car that afternoon, I was waiting for her in the driveway. She didn't even try to look sheepish. Instead, she stepped out of the car like she had every right to be there. "Hey, Megan," she said casually. "Needed the car for a quick run to the store. No big deal." "No big deal?" I repeated, my voice icy. "You stole the keys again. That's not borrowing, that's theft." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, relax. You're so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I took a step closer, my hands trembling with anger. "You planted a razor blade in that car, Ashley. Do you know what could have happened? Do you even care?" Her smirk faltered for just a second, but then she shrugged. "You're fine, aren't you? No harm done." "No harm done," I hissed. "You're unhinged, and I'm done letting you walk all over this family." Ashley's eyes flashed with anger. "This family? You're just some outsider who married in. Ted's my brother, and that bond is stronger than anything you'll ever have." I stared at her, my heart pounding. She truly believed that. In her mind, I was the intruder, and she'd do anything to push me out. "You need help," I said finally, my voice steady. "And if Ted won't see it, I'll make sure he does." Ashley scoffed, climbing back into her car. "Good luck with that." She drove off, leaving me standing there in the driveway, my fists clenched at my sides. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting my daughter, my sanity, and whatever was left of my family. And I wasn't backing down. The tension in our house was suffocating. Ted and I barely spoke after the latest blow-up with Ashley. Every time I tried to bring it up, he'd shut me down or make excuses for her. And when he wasn't doing that, he'd retreat into himself like none of this was happening. But Candace wasn't retreating. She noticed everything. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked one night as we sat on the couch. She curled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I'm fine, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "Don't worry about me." "You don't look fine," she said softly. "I don't like how Dad's been acting." I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. I don't either. We sat there in silence for a while, just the two of us. I knew I had to be strong for her, but deep down, I was exhausted. I was tired of fighting with Ted, tired of dealing with Ashley's chaos, tired of feeling like I was losing control of my own life. Then, as if on cue, the doorbell rang. I didn't even have to guess who it was. I opened the door, and there she stood, Ashley. "Hi, Megan," she said, her voice annoyingly cheerful. "Is Ted home?" "No," I said flatly. "He's still at work." Ashley pouted, but there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Too bad. I needed to talk to him. I crossed my arms. "What do you need, Ashley?" She hesitated for a moment, then smirked. "I wanted to borrow the car again." I blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." She laughed, like this was all some big joke. "Come on, Megan. It's not like you're using it right now." "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not." Her face twisted into a scowl. "Why do you have to be such a bitch?" "Excuse me?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I wasn't about to apologize. "You don't get to call me that. Not after everything you've done." Ashley rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You're just jealous that Ted cares about me more than he cares about you." I stared at her, stunned. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You'll never come between us. No matter what you do, he'll always take my side." Something in me snapped. "You know what?" "You're right," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "He will take your side. But that's not my problem anymore." Ashley blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I took a step back, my heart racing. "I'm done. I'm done with this family drama, done with Ted making excuses for you, done with you walking all over me." "You wouldn't dare leave," she said, her tone dripping with disbelief. "Watch me," I said. That night, I packed a bag for Candace and me. I wasn't about to keep putting her through this toxic mess. When Ted came home, he found us sitting in the living room, ready to leave. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. "We're leaving," I said calmly. "I've had enough." Ted's face twisted with confusion and panic. "Megan, don't do this. We can fix things." "No, Ted," I said, shaking my head. "You can't fix things because you refuse to see the real problem. Your sister has crossed every line, and you've let her. I can't stay in a marriage where I'm constantly put second." Candace stood up, her bag slung over her shoulder. "I hate seeing Mom like this. You used to care about us, Dad. What happened?" Ted's expression crumbled, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "Candace, No," she said, her voice steady. "I don't want to hear it. You've been choosing Aunt Ashley over us for years." She walked past him, and I followed. Ted didn't try to stop us. The next day I filed for divorce. I thought Ted would fight me on it, but he didn't. Maybe deep down, he knew there was nothing left to save. Meanwhile, I got a text from Wesley. "Wesley, can we meet?" I agreed, curious to hear what he had to say. We met at a small cafe, and he looked more tired than I'd ever seen him. "I'm divorcing Ashley," he said bluntly, sipping his coffee. I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry it came to this." "So am I," he said with a sigh. "But it's for the best." We sat in silence for a moment, before he spoke again. "She's been cheating on me," he said quietly. "For years, apparently. I only found out recently, but I should have seen it sooner." I wasn't surprised. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Wesley said. "I'm just glad I know the truth now." We talked for a while longer, sharing stories about the chaos Ashley had caused. By the end of the conversation, there was a sense of relief between us, like we were finally free from her toxic influence. A few days later, I got a call from Ted. "I was wrong," he said, his voice broken. "Please don't go through with the divorce. I'll do anything to fix this." But it was too late. "Ted," I said softly, "I loved you. I still do, in a way. but I can't be with someone who doesn't put his family first. There was a long pause. What about Candace? Doesn't she need a father? She needs a father who respects her mother, I said. And right now, that's not you. Ted started crying, a grown man, reduced to sobs over the phone. But I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd made his choices, and now he had to live with them. A month after the divorce papers were signed, life felt lighter. Candace and I moved into a cozy apartment near her school. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. No more walking on eggshells, no more Ashley, no more pretending everything was fine. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, Candace peeked into the kitchen. "Mom, can my friend stay over tonight?" I looked up, surprised. "Of course. What should we make for dinner?" Her eyes lit up. "Your fried chicken. I've been telling her about it, and she really wants to try it." I chuckled. "All right. Let's make it together." Candace grinned and tied on an apron. "Really? You'll teach me?" "Of course," I said, pulling out the ingredients. "I want you to know how to make it just right." As we worked side by side, mixing the marinade and frying the chicken to a golden crisp, I couldn't help but feel a surge of happiness. This was what I'd been missing, a simple, peaceful life with my daughter. Later that night, after Candace's friend left, we sat together on the couch. The TV played softly in the background, but neither of us was really watching. "Mom," Candace said suddenly, "I want to be like you." I blinked, surprised. "Like me?" She nodded. "You're strong. You stood up for yourself when things weren't right. A lot of people would have just stayed quiet, but you didn't." Her words hit me harder than she probably realized. I'd spent so much time doubting myself, wondering if I'd made the right decisions, if I'd ruined our family by leaving Ted, but hearing Candace say that made it all worth it. "I just did what I had to do," I said softly. Candace shook her head. "No, you did more than that. You showed me that it's okay to stand up for yourself, that it's okay to walk away when people treat you badly." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. "Thank you, sweetie." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Mom." For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. A few weeks later, I got a call from Ted. I almost didn't answer. I'd been avoiding his calls ever since the divorce was finalized, but something told me to pick up this time. "Megan," he said, his voice tired. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to say. I see things more clearly now," he continued. "Ashley's been staying with me since Wesley kicked her out, and, well, you were right. About everything." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "And what do you want me to do with that, Ted?" "I just wanted you to know," he said quietly. "I know I can't fix what I broke, but I'm sorry." There was a long silence between us before he spoke again. "She's still the same," he said, almost to himself. "She hasn't changed. She's still using me, still making excuses, and I can't do it anymore." It wasn't my job to save Ted from his sister. I'd tried, and he hadn't listened. Now he had to deal with the consequences. "I hope you figure things out," I said gently, "for your own sake." "Take care of Candace," he said, his voice breaking. "Tell her I love her." "I will," I promised before hanging up. Ashley tried calling me once after that, but I didn't answer. I knew she'd never take responsibility for what she did. People like her never do. Last I heard, she was still living with Ted, leeching off him the same way she always had. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I was done with both of them. Now, a year later, I'm happier than I've been in a long time. Candace and I have built a life for ourselves, one filled with small joys and quiet moments of peace. I kept my accessory business going, and it's grown into a steady source of income. It turns out I make more than Ted ever knew. Funny how he thought he was the sole provider. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours. And that's all I ever wanted. One night, as we sat down for dinner, Candace looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, do you ever regret it? Leaving Dad? I shook my head without hesitation. No, I regret not leaving sooner. She smiled. I'm glad you did. Me too, I said softly. Me too. As we dug into our fried chicken, laughter filled the apartment. It was just the two of us, but it felt like a full house. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, we're happy, and that's enough. Story 2. During summer vacation, I traveled up to my folks' place on a balmy July evening. These visits had become a recurring theme after 3 years of college. Mom's overzealous embraces, Dad's uncomfortable backpats and incessant inquiries about my academic pursuits never fully concealed their lack of interest. Honey? Maya? From the porch, Mom called. Dinner is almost around the corner. Additionally, guess who is coming over? I didn't have to speculate. As if they needed to remind everyone of their success, my older sister Jennifer and her husband Tom had developed the practice of stopping by whenever I was at home. As expected, we were all seated around the dining table 2 hours later. Mom had taken out her tablecloth for the momentous occasion. Only during Jennifer's visit did the one with the beautiful lace trim see daylight. Using the dramatic flair she had developed over the years, Jennifer proclaimed this while putting down her fork. Tom and I had been considering spending Christmas together in Hawaii. Like a happy schoolgirl, Mom practically clapped her hands. Yes, it would be fantastic. Dad grinned proudly. What a wonderful thought, my love. Then, with that recognizable sarcastic grin on her lips, Jennifer turned to face me. Do you believe you can afford it, Maya? Or ought your big sister to assist you? I held my child firm even though my cheeks burned. I am able to control my own spending. Regards. Are you certain? Jennifer's eyebrow went up, since the estimated cost of airfare and lodging is $3,000 per person. My water nearly swallowed me. $3,000. That exceeded the sum of my savings. Additionally, the minimum wage was all I was earning from my part-time work. But I'd rather not take Jennifer's kindness than spend the next 6 months eating ramen. I'll manage, I responded. I reiterated forcefully. Jennifer turned back to our parents with a shrug. In any case, the restaurant is doing fantastically. We recently brought on an Italian sous chef. Is it not unbelievable? Here in our town, we have real Italian food. Dear Mom, Maya said, you're so entrepreneurial. It would be wise for you to learn about business savvy from your sister. Indeed, Maya. Jennifer added her voice. One day, you could even be able to work for me. I felt 10 years old again as I sat at the dinner table and watched my parents becoming enamored with Jennifer's plans for Hawaii. There had been no change. The same happy look on Dad's face, the same eager nods for Mom, the same sense of invisibility. As she had been since we were little, Jennifer remained their golden child. Given the impact it had on our parents' perceptions of us, the 5 years that separated us may as well have been 50. Although they never explicitly stated it, their deeds spoke louder than words. The person they trusted was Jennifer. The one who would succeed, they were certain. Hey, do you recall Jennifer's victory in the 10th grade school business competition? Dad used to reminisce much. We were immediately aware of her business energy. They weren't mean about it, which is funny. They never intentionally denigrated or injured me. They simply didn't remember me. Occasionally, as if I were a guest star on the Jennifer Show, they would remember to inquire about my needs or grades. However, their gaze kept returning to Jennifer as they awaited her next triumph to rejoice over. I'm grateful for Grandpa Joe. That large old house with the creaking swing and the wraparound porch was his home. The only one who seemed to care enough about us both was him. He was a prosperous businessman who made a commitment early on to cover the cost of both of our college educations. I was 13 when Jennifer went off to college. I hoped that would change. I would finally get the opportunity to be the daughter in the spotlight. I was mistaken. Boy, Jennifer just gave me a call. Mom would virtually vibrate with delight as she rushed into my room. She has joined the team that debates. This weekend, we ought to make the trip up to visit Jennifer. A breakfast would be suggested by Dad. We can give her some cash to cover her bills. The laptop would sit on the kitchen counter as they prepared supper, and they would spend hours on Skype with her. Even without Jennifer, her voice could be heard throughout our home. I would sneak out the back door and go to my grandfather's house in the interim. Grandpa's afternoons turned become a haven for me. My real house never seemed as much like home as our small routine did. With a container of mint chocolate chip ice cream between us, we would curl up on his faded leather couch and watch old movies on his antiquated television. "What's so wonderful about Casablanca?" "Maya," he would say, halting the film. "The obvious hero isn't the point. It's about the silent person who acts morally while no one else is around." On other days, we would play chess, and Dad would tell me stories about his own upbringing as we ordered a pepperoni pizza. He took me to the lake behind his house on the weekends to teach me how to fish. He would remark that the problem with fishing is that he assisted me in baiting my hook. The greatest fish aren't usually the ones who create the most noise. The greatest memorable moments can occasionally be found in the quiet ones that go deep. I used to think that perhaps, just possibly, I didn't have to be the favorite to be loved while I sat in his tiny fishing boat and watched the sun shimmer on the sea. Without making a huge deal out of it, Grandpa had a knack of making me feel noticed. "Do you want to rewatch Roman Holiday?" After a hard day of fishing, he would inquire. "I purchased those chocolate biscuits that you enjoy." Unlike Jennifer's accomplishments, such moments weren't ostentatious or dazzling. They were genuine, uncomplicated, and silent. When my parents were transporting spending money to Jennifer over state lines, Grandpa was teaching me how to play poker with Mrs. Chips. 5 years flew by, filled with accomplishments and family feasts. Of course, all of Jennifer's. She earned an honors degree from college, got a position at a big company, and began dating Tom, whom my parents said was the one for her right away. I was getting ready for my own college experience in the meanwhile. Grandpa gave me the tightest embrace he had ever given me on the day I departed for college. Something about his hug felt different, more definitive, more intense. He murmured in my ear, "Maya, I love you so much. Remember that always." At the time, I dismissed it with a laugh. "You're behaving as though we won't ever see one another again, Grandpa. I'll spend Thanksgiving at home." He simply touched my face with that soft smile of his. "Kiddo, just keep in mind what I stated." Mom contacted me 2 months into my freshman year. When she told me that Grandpa had passed away while he was sleeping, her voice was cracking. The globe momentarily ceased to revolve. Unable to comprehend the words, I sat in my dorm room with my bedphone glued to my ear. The day following the service, the funeral took place on a clear day. For the will reading, we all assembled at Grandpa's lawyer's office. I was fidgeting in the scratchy department shop as Jennifer sat primly in her expensive black outfit. I purchased one for my daughter Sarah at the last minute. The lawyer read, "I leave you $50,000. Mom squeezed Dad's hand and nodded. "I will $300,000 to Jennifer, my granddaughter." Jennifer's expression brightened. She turned to face Tom right away, who had been watching her during the burial. "We still have enough money to open our restaurant so we can have that ideal wedding right now, baby. And to Maya, my granddaughter," the lawyer went on, "I give up my Maple Street home, everything in it, and the land around it." After a little period of silence, Jennifer started giggling. "Maya got the ancient house, oh my God. It's funny." She wiped her eyes from laughter. "Sis, don't worry. Perhaps you could sell it and get a wonderful present for yourself. But I don't think anyone would desire that ancient groaning building." Mom gave Jennifer a mild reprimand, but she was already grinning at her older daughter's ideas. Jennifer took over the solemn moment and declared, "We'll have the wedding in spring. I already have the ideal business strategy for a real Italian restaurant with Tom. This is precisely the amount of money we required." As promised, Jennifer poured herself into the wedding preparations. It was an amazing event. A 5-tier cake, ice sculptures, white doves, and what seemed like half the town were there. I watched her marry Tom, and what my mother referred to as the social event of the season, while wearing a bridesmaid dress she had selected. Even the tan had faded before the honeymoon. Tom and Jennifer started their eatery. It was dubbed Bella Vita, lovely life. In an article about them, the local newspaper commended the young business people for introducing real Italian food to our tiny community. The article was framed and displayed in the living room by Mom and Dad. I attempted to decide what to do with my inheritance in the interim. It wouldn't be cheap to maintain that large old house, and the property taxes weren't negligible. One weekend, after doing the math, I believed I had figured out the answer. At the upcoming family meal, I made the decision to mention it. As I pushed my green beans around the plate, I tried to sound confident by saying, "I've been thinking about the house. I could rent it out because I spend the majority of the year at college. That would assist in paying for the upkeep and taxes." I looked up at the ensuing silence. Jennifer and Mom were sharing one of those glances that, as a child, had always been a sign of trouble. Suddenly, Tom, Jennifer's husband, showed a keen interest in his mashed potatoes. Mom said, "Oh, honey," in that condescending tone she saved for when she felt I was being especially naive. "When your sister and Tom need a place to live, why would you want to rent to strangers?" I blinked. "What?" Jennifer clinked delicately and put down her wine glass. "Don't you think it makes perfect sense? The extra room would be helpful to Tom and me, particularly now that we are in charge of the eatery. It goes without saying that you won't charge your own sister rent. That would be absurd, wouldn't it, Mother?" "It would, of course," Mom agreed immediately. "Family helps. Family." And just like that, they turned back to their previous conversation about the restaurant's new wine list. Dad nodded along. Jennifer gestured animatedly about some expensive candy she'd imported, and Tom finally looked up from his potatoes to join in. I sat there, fork suspended halfway to my mouth as the reality of what had just happened sank in. I could protest, of course. I could point out that it was my house, my inheritance, my decision. I could remind them that Jennifer and Tom had just gotten a huge sum of money from Grandpa's. Well, while I got, apparently nothing now. But I knew it wouldn't make any difference. They'd look at me with that mixture of disappointment and annoyance they always did when I didn't go along with their plans. Mom would sigh and remind me about family loyalty. Jennifer would make subtle jabs about my selfishness for weeks. Dad would give me that look, the one that said I was making things difficult for no good reason. So I did what I'd always done. I swallowed my protests, along with my now called green beans, and stayed quiet. The next weekend, Jennifer and Tom moved into my house. She sent me pictures of how they were updating the place. Grandpa's old leather chair replaced by some modern monstrosity. His beloved fishing photos taken down to make room for framed reviews of their restaurant. While I studied for midterms in my cramped dorm room, my sister and her husband lived rent-free in my house every time I came home for breaks. I had to ask permission to visit what was legally my own property. Let's get back to the present. After that summer dinner, I threw myself into work with renewed determination. Between morning shifts at the campus cafe and evening hours at the study library, I barely had time to breathe. But every time I felt like giving up, I'd think about Hawaii and push myself to pick up an extra shift. When Jennifer called in late November, I had the money ready. $3,000. Nearly every penny I'd earned over the past few months. "Send it today," she instructed. "I need to finalize the bookings." I transferred the money immediately, my hands shaking with excitement as I clicked send on the banking app. That weekend, I treated myself to a new swimsuit. Nothing fancy, just a simple blue one-piece on sale. My friend Lisa let me borrow her good suitcase, the one with the wheels that actually worked. December 23rd arrived crisp and cold. I showed up at my parents' house with my borrowed suitcase and new swimsuit, practically buzzing with excitement. But something felt off. Mom barely met my eyes when she hugged me, and Dad kept clearing his throat the way he did when he was uncomfortable. Then Jennifer and Tom arrived. The moment they walked in, I knew something was wrong. Jennifer had that look on her face, the same one she'd worn when she told me she'd be living in my house, rent-free. Mom and Jennifer exchanged glances that made my stomach twist. We sat down to dinner, and for a few minutes, there was only the sound of forks against plates. Then Jennifer set down her wine glass and cleared her throat. "We need to discuss something," she announced. "The restaurant? Well, we've hit a rough patch. The figures aren't what we projected." Mom reached over and squeezed her hand supportively. I observed she already knew what was coming. "We've had to make some painful decisions," Jennifer said, her voice dripping with phony remorse. "We've had to trim certain costs, including our contribution to the Hawaii vacation budget." My fork froze halfway to my lips, so she carried on, waving between herself, Tom, and our parents. "We've all discussed it. and we think the best answer is for Maya to sit this one out." The room was whirling, but I already paid my portion. I managed to say yes. "Well?" Jennifer grinned, that condescending smile I knew so well. "That money will assist cover the balance of our costs. We couldn't possibly cancel on everyone, and Tom and I never even had a full honeymoon since we got right into the restaurant business." I glanced at Mom and Dad, wanting for them to say anything, to protest to this lunacy, but they simply sat there, Mom still rubbing Jennifer's hand, Dad's scrutinizing his plate as if it held the mysteries of the cosmos. I paid my portion. With a trembling voice, I repeated, $3,000. Maya, it was all I had saved. Mom gave me a start when she snapped her tongue. Family supports family. Tom and Jennifer are having a terrible time running the business. Being understanding is the least you can do. You get it, I muttered. Yes, I do understand. In addition, someone must keep an eye on the house while we are away. Mom looked back at Jennifer. Let's talk about the hotel arrangements now. I got up so quickly that my chair scuffed the floor. No one even raised their heads. I went upstairs to my former bedroom. I could hear their happy chatter drifting up behind me. As if they hadn't just taken my money and dashed my hopes, they carried on talking and laughing. That night, I slept in my childhood bed and gazed at the stars that glowed in the darkness. Years ago, Grandpa had assisted me in adhering to the ceiling. I made up my mind. The following morning, I performed my role flawlessly. As they packed their bags into 2 cabs that were waiting, I stood on the front porch, grinning and waving. "Remember to water your mother's plants," Jennifer yelled out as she checked her mail each day and adjusted her expensive sunglasses. "Don't worry about anything," Mom added. I smiled as I reassured them. Jennifer peered out the window of the cab. "To make sure you don't feel excluded, I'll send you a ton of pictures." She chuckled as though she had just cracked the most hilarious joke. I waited until the 2 cabs vanished around the bend. After that, I went directly to my car and drove to my grandfather's house. My home? The possessions of Tom and Jennifer were all over the place. The closets were crammed with her clothing. Once Grandpa's suits were in use. Where his fishing photos had been, their pretentious art hung. On the mantel where Grandpa kept our chess set, their wedding pictures were displayed. I began by removing boxes and suitcases from the master bedroom and carefully packing everything. Expensive shoes and designer clothing. Tom's suits were made to order. Everything was placed in bags and boxes. Grandpa's old study contained their important documents, which I packed. For Christmas Eve service, the moving company charged me 3 times what they normally charge. I went to a 24-hour locksmith next. He added a holiday premium as well. But I didn't care. I watched with satisfaction as he changed every lock in my house. I drove back to campus, arriving just as my friends were starting their orphan Christmas celebration, our nickname for the holiday party we threw for students who couldn't or didn't want to go home. "Maya!" Lisa exclaimed when I walked in. "I thought you'd be in Hawaii by now." "Change of plans," I said, accepting the cup of hot chocolate she offered. "But you know what? I think I'm exactly where I need to be for a week." My phone buzzed constantly with Jennifer's updates from Hawaii. Each notification felt like a deliberate jab to the ribs. "Living our best life," read the caption under a photo of Jennifer and Tom sipping cocktails on the beach. "Making memories with the people who matter most," accompanied a sunset dinner picture. My Instagram feed became a showcase of their perfect Hawaiian vacation in Jennifer lounging by infinity pools. Mom and Dad smiling at luau's, Tom attempting to surf. Every shot was expertly edited and labeled with sickening platitudes about family time and much-needed vacations from running a business. The worst was her post on understanding when to step back from work and enjoy life. That one came with a photo of all of them clutching champagne glasses at a New Year's Eve celebration, paid for with my funds. Then, early on New Year's Day, my phone burst. "Maya, why are all of Jennifer's stuff in our living room?" "Mom, call me quickly." "Dad, what the heck did you do with our stuff?" "Jennifer, the locks are functioning. Did you modify them?" "Tom." I watched the texts roll in my phone, buzzing like an angry bee. "This is simply inappropriate. Call us immediately. Mom, if you don't bring the new keys right now, you'll regret this." Jennifer. "Maya, Elizabeth Parker, pick up the phone right now, Dad." The texts continued. becoming more and more irate. My screen was loaded with words like nasty, selfish, and ungrateful. Jennifer's text grew more inflammatory as she was accused of betraying her family and wrecking their life. "After everything we've done for you, Mom, how dare you abandon your own sister? You're only envious that we were able to visit Hawaii while you were not. This is the most self-centered thing you have ever done, Jennifer." By mid-morning, Dad, my phone had over 100 messages and 47 missed calls. With every angry message, I read it, letting their words flow over me without replying. I felt more liberated, lighter. All they wanted to do was get angry and threaten. I was no longer the obedient youngster. Leaving their calls and messages unanswered, I set my phone on mute and left for breakfast with my pals. I didn't feel the need to defend or explain myself to them for the first time in my life. My phone displayed more than 200 missed calls by the evening. White sounds has replaced the continuous buzzing, but I eventually responded, "How dare you?" as my mother's name appeared on my screen for the 201st time. Before I could say hello, Mom's voice burst over the speaker. "Are you aware of the suffering you have caused your sister?" The voice of my father joined in from a different extension. "This conduct is totally intolerable." Surprisingly calm, I sat cross-legged on my bed in my dorm room. "Is it okay for someone to take my $3,000 and travel to Hawaii without me?" That was not the same. The eatery was spluttered by Mom. "No." With a calm voice, I interrupted her. "Let me speak. For once in my life, allow me to speak." Amazingly, they stopped talking. "My money was stolen by you. Cash?" To make money, I put in extra shifts. "While operating their restaurant, you allowed Tom and Jennifer to live in my house for free. You have consistently acted as though I am nothing in comparison to Jennifer. Always. It's not. Dad got things started. Do you recall when I graduated from high school? Jennifer called regarding a job interview, so you departed early. My letter of admittance to college. Given that Jennifer had recently begun dating Tom, you hardly gave it a glance. Every accomplishment and significant event in my life has been eclipsed by Jennifer's most recent. Whatever it was that came out of me, it was the voice of years of anger and contempt." Hawaii follows. "My money wasn't only taken by you, it made you chuckle. I received mocking images from Jennifer. How did that feel, do you know? Knowing how vicious my own relatives can be." The other end was silent for a long time. Mom's voice was calmer but still guarded when she finally spoke. "You must comprehend, Maya. Tom and Jennifer are having a lot of trouble running the business. They require assistance. Additionally, I wanted parents who were just as concerned about me as they were about Jennifer. A sister who didn't treat me like a doormat was what I needed. I needed a family that didn't think of me as Jennifer's fallback option. Where will they reside, though?" Mom's voice broke. "They can continue to live with you as they are, or, like other adults, they can rent an apartment. Their safety net is no longer my residence, and I'm leasing it to Real, paying tenants starting next month." "You can't." Mom started. "I will. And I can. I have already had a conversation with a property management firm. They're drafting the lease." Before they could answer, I hung up. My phone exploded with Jennifer's messages half an hour later. "You are vengeful." Which read the first one. "Everything is damaged by you. Now that you have ruined our life, I hope you are content." Every message was more hateful than the one before it, a barrage of hate that would have destroyed me a year ago. I simply switched off my phone and went to bed. A year ago, that was. I haven't spoken to any of them since, and I'm currently in my senior year. I hear rumors through the family grapevine. At last, the eatery closed entirely. Tom and Jennifer are still residing with our parents, ostensibly getting back together before starting their next project. In the meantime, Grandpa's house had great renters thanks to the property management firm I hired. They pay taxes with their rent, with enough remaining to establish a respectable savings account. I handle the money carefully. Grandpa would probably be pleased with it. Occasionally. When I can't sleep, it's usually late at night. I wonder if we will ever get back together. I wonder if my mother will ever comprehend my actions. If Jennifer ever views me as a fellow human being instead of a convenience. I wonder if my father will ever defend me the way he always did for her. But then I think back to that day in Hawaii when I realized something while they were all sipping champagne that I had paid for. I no longer require their comprehension. I don't require their love, acceptance, or approval. My self-respect is what I need and have at last.